Lena stood alone in the vast, quiet graveyard, the cold wind biting at her face as she kneeled before the freshly dug grave. The dark sky above seemed to mirror the emptiness in her heart. She could still hear the sound of his voice in her ears, the way it had always been full of strength and confidence. But now all that remained were the echoes of his absence. Captain David Hall had been her partner, her protector, and her love. The memory of their last moments together haunted her. The battle had been fierce, the enemy overwhelming. She remembered the sound of blaster fire, the shouts of soldiers, and the heavy footsteps of combat boots on the cold metal floors of their ship. But then, silence. And David was gone. She had done everything she could to save him. She had pleaded, screamed, and fought. But the moment he fell, it had been too late. The blast that took his life had been too strong. The doctors said there was nothing they could do, and the world seemed to stop spinning in that moment. Her world had ended that day. Lena wiped a tear from her cheek as she placed a single red rose on the grave. "I'm sorry, David," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "I couldn't save you. I should have been stronger. I should have done more." Her heart weighed heavy as she bowed her head in sorrow. The wind howled around her, sending the leaves of nearby trees scattering through the air. She had come to visit his grave many times since that terrible day, but each visit only reminded her of her failure. She had promised him she would never leave, but somehow she had failed to keep that promise. As she knelt there, her mind wandered back to the time before the war. Before the chaos, there had been peace. David had been the man she had trusted most in the universe. They had trained together, fought side by side, and shared moments of laughter. Now, it all felt like a dream. A beautiful dream that had been shattered by the cruel reality of war. "I didn't save you, David," Lena whispered again, her voice barely audible above the wind. "I couldn't save you." The grave before her seemed to mock her words, standing cold and lifeless. She had spent years wondering if there was something she could have done differently. What if she had been faster? What if she had pushed harder to get to him? Maybe, just maybe, she could have saved him. The silence around her grew thick, almost suffocating, as the weight of her regret pressed down on her chest. She had never been good with loss. It was something she couldn't quite handle. And now, standing here in the graveyard, she felt as if she were buried alongside him, lost in the past, unable to move forward. A rustle of leaves stirred in the wind, but it didn't break the heavy stillness. Lena stood up slowly, brushing the dirt from her knees. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, faded photograph. It was the only picture she had left of the two of them together, David smiling beside her, his arm around her shoulder. It was a picture from a time before the war, before everything had changed. She closed her eyes, imagining what it would be like if things had gone differently, if David had survived, if they could have had a future together. But that future had been taken from them in an instant, and now she was left to face the consequences. She turned to leave, feeling a strange emptiness inside. Her feet moved slowly as if the weight of her guilt was pulling her back to the grave. But just as she was about to take another step, she heard something. A sound. Something faint, but unmistakable. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze in place, listening intently. The wind howled again, but this time it was different. There was something else. A rustle of footsteps. Light, almost imperceptible, but there nonetheless. Lena spun around quickly, her breath catching in her throat. Her eyes scanned the graveyard, her heart pounding in her chest. But there was no one. Nothing but the quiet, empty field stretching before her. "Must be the wind," she muttered to herself, shaking her head. She was starting to lose her grip on reality, wasn't she? The thought of David still being alive was ridiculous. He was gone. She had buried him herself, and the memorial was there for all to see. But as she started walking again, the feeling lingered in the air, like someone was watching her. She paused, glancing over her shoulder, but the graveyard was still empty. Only the distant hum of the city could be heard in the background. Lena's footsteps quickened as she moved toward the gate, eager to leave the oppressive silence behind her. But again, the rustling sound reached her ears. It was closer this time. It was not just the wind. Someone was there. Her pulse quickened, and she stopped in her tracks, her breath hitching in her chest. Slowly she turned again, her heart racing. This time her eyes locked on a figure in the distance, a tall silhouette standing near the entrance of the graveyard, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights. For a brief moment, Lena couldn't breathe. The figure was dressed in military attire, the same as David had worn. She couldn't make out his face, but the shape of him, the posture, was unmistakable. A sharp memory flickered in her mind, a moment from years ago when David had stood just like that. "No," she whispered, her voice shaking. "It can't be." Lena's legs wobbled beneath her as she took a step toward the figure, her mind racing. Could it be? Was this some kind of cruel trick her mind was playing on her? Or was this really him? The figure didn't move. He just stood there watching her from the shadows. With a trembling hand, Lena reached for the communicator on her wrist. She had to be sure. She had to know if she was losing her mind. She activated the device, her fingers hovering over the buttons as she prepared to call for help. But before she could press a single key, she heard a voice. "Lena." The word was spoken softly, yet with such clarity that it sent a chill down her spine. It was a voice she would know anywhere. The voice of the man she had lost. The voice of Captain David Hall. Lena froze, her heart nearly stopping in her chest. "David?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The figure in the distance didn't respond, but she saw a faint movement, a slight shift in position. And then, as if the universe had decided to grant her the impossible, he stepped forward. Lena's breath caught in her throat as the figure finally emerged from the shadows. It was him. David. Alive. Lena stood frozen in place, her heart thundering in her chest as she stared at the man standing before her. It couldn't be real. It couldn't be him. David. Alive. The man she had buried, the man she had mourned for months, was standing in front of her, wearing the same military uniform she had last seen him in. His face was slightly worn, his hair longer, but there was no mistaking the familiar features. The man she had lost was back, and yet, everything about the moment felt surreal. She blinked hard, trying to clear the fog in her mind. Was she dreaming? Had the pain and grief finally broken her mind? She couldn't breathe, and her legs trembled as if they might give way at any second. She had to be hallucinating. David was gone. The man in front of her had to be some trick of her mind, but then David spoke again, his voice deep and steady, yet filled with an unmistakable warmth that she had longed for. "Lena." He said her name like it was the most natural thing in the world, his voice so familiar, so real. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner." Lena's knees buckled, and she had to catch herself on the nearby grave marker, her hand gripping the cold stone for support. Her chest felt tight, and her mind raced to make sense of what was happening. Was this truly David? Or was she trapped in some cruel dream, her mind playing tricks on her after all the loss? "David," Lena managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. Her heart pounded as she struggled to speak. You're alive?" David took a step closer, his expression unreadable. He nodded slowly, his eyes meeting hers with a mixture of sorrow and something else, something she couldn't quite place. He looked different, not just physically, but in a way she couldn't explain. His presence was not just that of the man she had known. It was something more. "Alive, Lena," David said softly, "but not in the way you remember." Lena's mind swirled with questions, each one more confusing than the last. She wanted to rush forward and embrace him, to hold him, to confirm that he was real. But something stopped her. She could see it in his eyes. There was more to this story than he was telling. She had to know what had happened. She needed to understand. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. How are you here?" David hesitated, looking down for a moment before meeting her gaze again. "I wasn't killed, Lena," Not like you think. I was taken by an alien race. Lena's heart skipped a beat. Alien? Taken? This sounded insane, like something from one of the stories she had read as a child. But looking at him now, standing there before her, she knew that whatever had happened, it was real. Somehow, against all reason, it was real. Taken? She repeated, her voice cracking with disbelief. By aliens? David nodded slowly, his expression grim. They saved me, Lena. The Cathal, an alien race with advanced technology. They didn't just save me, they changed me. I'm not the same man you knew. Lena's mind struggled to keep up. Changed you? She whispered, her eyes searching his face. What do you mean? What have they done to you? David took another step forward, his face showing a mixture of pain and guilt. I'm not human anymore. Not entirely. They did something to my body. Something they said would make me stronger, faster. They wanted me to be part of their army. But they didn't just give me power, they made me something else. I don't feel like myself anymore, Lena. Lena felt her. The cool evening air swept across the small park where Lena and David had stopped to rest. The quiet hum of the city echoed in the distance, but the world around them felt suspended in a strange silence. Lena still couldn't wrap her mind around what had happened, what David had said. He was alive, but not in the way she had hoped. His return, while something she had dreamed of for months, brought with it a deep sense of fear and uncertainty. David had insisted they find a quiet place to talk. It wasn't safe yet, he explained, but this was the only way they could begin to understand what was really happening. As they sat on a bench under a flickering street lamp, Lena watched him closely, trying to make sense of the man before her. He looked the same, but his eyes told a different story. There was something unsettling in them, something distant. The warmth that had once been there seemed to have faded, replaced by a coldness that made her shiver. David had told her enough to leave her more confused than ever. He wasn't the same. He wasn't entirely human anymore. The Cathal, the alien race that had saved him, had changed him in ways that Lena could not even begin to understand. She could feel the weight of those words pressing down on her. David, she began slowly, her voice trembling as she searched for the right words. You keep saying you're not the same, that the Cathal changed you. But what exactly do you mean by that? What did they do to you? David took a deep breath and looked away for a moment as if he was trying to gather his thoughts. His hands clenched at his sides, and Lena could see the struggle in his eyes. It wasn't easy for him to speak about this, she realized. It was painful. But he had to. They didn't just save me, Lena. They altered my body, my mind. They used their technology to make me stronger, faster. They injected me with something that changed the way I think, the way I feel. I can't explain it, but I don't always feel like the same person. They wanted to turn me into a weapon, to be part of their army, to fight for them for whatever war they're waging. Lena felt a sharp pain in her chest as she listened to him. Her heart ached for the man she had once known. The David she loved was still somewhere in there, but he wasn't the same. How could he be? The alien technology had changed him in ways she couldn't even imagine. David, Lena whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. You're telling me that the Cathal, these aliens, changed who you are? They turned you into something not human anymore? What does that mean for us? For me? David's eyes softened, his lips pressing into a thin line. He wanted to comfort her, to explain, but he didn't know how. What could he say? How could he make her understand? He wasn't sure if he understood himself. I don't know what it means for you, Lena, he said quietly. I only know that. I don't have much time. The Cathal have their own agenda. They didn't just take me, they've been watching Earth, watching humanity for years. They think we're the key to winning some galactic war. And now that they've transformed me, they're going to use me as part of that war. I can't let that happen. I won't let them control me. Lena sat in stunned silence, trying to process the weight of his words. The Cathal weren't just some distant race. They were planning something, and David was at the center of it all. The fact that they had turned him into a weapon was enough to make her feel as if her world had been turned upside down. She had thought she lost him once, but now she was faced with a new, terrifying reality. The person standing before her wasn't the same man she had fallen in love with. He couldn't be. "But why come to me?" Lena asked, her voice steady, despite the turmoil inside her. "Why are you here now? After all this time, why didn't you contact me sooner? Why didn't you let me know what was happening?" David's gaze dropped to the ground. He looked regretful, as if he had been carrying a weight too heavy to bear. He had made a choice to stay away. But now, he had no other option. He couldn't face the truth alone anymore. "I couldn't contact you, Lena. I wasn't allowed to," he explained, his voice low and heavy. "The Cathal kept me hidden. They didn't want anyone to know about me. They wanted to control me, shape me into something that would serve their purposes. They didn't care about me. They only cared about using me for their war. When I escaped, I didn't know where to go, how to find you. I didn't know if I could ever be the person you remembered." Lena's heart ached for him. She saw the pain in his eyes, the weight of his guilt. He had suffered, and now he was asking her to help him. But how could she? How could she help someone who was no longer the man she knew? "What do you want me to do, David?" Lena asked, her voice filled with a mix of confusion and fear. "What do you need from me?" David's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment she saw the man she loved. He was still in there. The man who had once been her partner, her protector. He was still fighting to hold on to that humanity, despite everything that had been done to him. "I need your help to stop them, Lena," he said, his voice pleading. "I can't do this alone. The Cathal are dangerous. They've already begun their plans. They want to use me, and others like me, to build an army. If they succeed, it won't just be Earth that's in danger. The entire galaxy could fall under their control. They think they can manipulate us, but I won't let them. I won't let them use me like a weapon." Lena felt her heart break all over again. She had never imagined this. She had never imagined that her love for David would bring her to this point, standing on the edge of a galactic war, facing down an alien threat that she had no way of understanding. But one thing was clear. David needed her. She could see that now. Despite everything, despite the changes he had undergone, he was still the man she loved. He was still the man who had protected her, who had stood by her side. He had come back to her, and now he needed her help to fight, a war that neither of them had ever asked for. "I don't know what I can do to help, David," she said quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "But I'll try. I'll help you. We'll figure this out together." David's eyes softened, and for the first time since his return, he allowed himself a small, tired smile. "Thank you, Lena. You don't know how much this means to me. But..." Just as the moment seemed to settle, the ground beneath them rumbled, and a low mechanical hum filled the air. Lena's eyes widened in alarm as she looked around, feeling the tension in the atmosphere. Something wasn't right. They were being watched. David's expression hardened instantly. He stepped in front of Lena, his body tense, every muscle ready for a fight. "Get down!" he shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. Before Lena could react, a bright light flashed from the sky, and the sound of engines roaring filled the air. A massive ship, something she had never seen before, descended from the clouds, its metallic surface gleaming in the dim light of the street lamp. It was alien, unmistakably alien. The Cathal had found them. The ground shook with the roar of the ship as it descended, casting a shadow over Lena and David. The strange alien craft hovered silently above them, its sleek metallic surface shimmering under the fading light of the street lamp. Lena's heart raced in her chest, the sense of danger palpable. The Cathal had found them. She could feel it in the air, the heavy, suffocating tension. There was no escaping this. The war had come to their doorstep. David stepped forward, his posture tense, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had seen ships like this before. Cathal warships. The thought of facing them again, after everything he had been through, sent a chill through him. He had hoped to stay hidden, to protect Lena from the horrors of the universe he had been thrust into. But now there was no choice. The Cathal had found him. They had found them both. "They're here," David muttered under his breath, his voice tight. "We have to move now." Lena's mind was still racing, trying to process the sight before her. She had never imagined anything like this. An alien ship, hovering just above the ground, its size dwarfing everything around it. It was a ship from a race she had only heard of in distant stories. The Cathal. An advanced alien civilization, powerful beyond comprehension. And now, they were here, right above them. "David, what do we do?" Lena asked, her voice shaking. The weight of the situation was finally starting to settle in. She had always known that the world was bigger than she had ever realized, but she hadn't been prepared for this, not in a million years. David's eyes scanned the area, his mind racing. He could feel the Cathal's presence now, their technology, their intentions. They were never far behind. He had tried to escape them once, but now it seemed they had found a way to track him. And worse, they had brought their full force with them. "We can't stay here," he said, grabbing Lena's arm and pulling her toward the nearest alley. "We need to get to a safe place now." Lena didn't question him. She followed his lead, her mind still reeling from the sudden turn of events. She had never seen David like this before. The calm, confident man she once knew was now acting like a man who had seen too much. He was different and yet the same. He was still her David, but now he was a soldier, fighting not just for survival, but for something much larger than themselves. As they moved quickly through the alley, Lena's thoughts raced. The Cathal were here, and they weren't just looking for David. They were looking for something that only he could give them. She could feel the weight of his secret pressing down on both of them, and she knew, deep down, that their Livy. The night had fallen silent again, but the air was thick with tension. Lena sat on an old crate in the dark corner of the abandoned building, staring at the floor. David had been pacing back and forth, his eyes scanning every corner, his mind racing. He could feel the weight of time pressing on him. They didn't have much time. The Cathal were out there, and they were closing in on them. David's body ached, but it wasn't from physical exhaustion. It was from the heavy burden of responsibility, the pressure to stop the alien race that had altered him, and the weight of the fate of Earth hanging in the balance. "We need to act quickly," David muttered, his voice filled with urgency. "The Cathal aren't just waiting, they're already building their forces. I've seen their plans, they want an army. They'll use humans to fight their battles, and when they're done, they'll use us until there's nothing left." Lena looked up at him, her expression filled with concern. She could see the struggle in his eyes, the battle he was fighting within himself. He had been transformed into something else, something he hadn't asked for, and yet he was still fighting. For Earth, for humanity, for her. "What do we do? Lena asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "We can't keep running forever. We have to find a way to stop them. But how?" David paused, his hand resting on the wall as he glanced toward the window, where the faint glow of the distant city lights barely filtered through the grime. He had to find a way. He couldn't let the Cathal control him, or anyone else. The galaxy was already in chaos. He had been part of the war before, but this was different. Now he had a personal stake. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about fighting for something bigger. This was about humanity's future. "I've been thinking about their plans," David said after a long pause, his voice more controlled now. "They've already started creating their super soldiers. I was there first, but I won't be the last. There are others, humans who have been altered like me. They're already preparing for war. The Cathal are using us as their weapons, but they're not invincible. I know that. We just need to find their weakness." Lena nodded slowly, her mind working to connect the pieces. If they were going to stop the Cathal, they had to act fast. But how? The Cathal were powerful, technologically advanced. They had the advantage in every way. What could they possibly do to fight back? "Do you have a plan?" she asked quietly, her eyes fixed on David. How do we even begin to fight? Them? David turned to face her, his gaze intense. I'm not sure yet, but I know one thing. We have to find their base. If we can get there, we can learn more about their technology. We can disrupt their plans. They've been hiding in the shadows for too long. We need to take the fight to them. If we can destroy their operations, we can stop them before they spread any further. Lena's heart raced at the thought. Finding the Cathal's base? It sounded impossible. The Cathal had advanced technology. They could hide in plain sight, move across the galaxy at will. How could they possibly find their base, let alone destroy it? Do you really think we can do it? Lena asked, her voice filled with doubt. How can we get close enough? The Cathal have been hiding for years. They've been preparing. We don't even know where to start. David's eyes softened and he stepped closer to her. His expression was filled with determination. I know it seems impossible, but we have to try. I can't let them win, Lena. I can't let them use us as tools in their war. We're humans, not weapons, and we deserve to live on our terms. Lena took a deep breath, her heart pounding. She had always trusted David. He was the man she had loved, the man who had always been there for her. He had risked everything to protect her, and now he was asking for her help. She couldn't turn away. Now, she couldn't let the man she loved fight alone. I'll help you, David, she said, her voice steady. Whatever it takes, we'll figure this out together. David gave her a small, grateful smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show her that he trusted her. Together, they would find a way. The Cathal wouldn't stand a chance. But as they made their plans, the sound of footsteps outside caught their attention. David's eyes widened with alarm as he motioned for Lena to be quiet. He stepped toward the window, peering out into the dark street below. His expression hardened as he saw several shadowy figures moving toward the building. The Cathal had found them. Again. David didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lena's arm and pulled her toward the back of the building. We need to move now, he said urgently. The Cathal are here, we can't stay. We need to get to the underground tunnel, it's our only chance. Lena's heart raced as she followed him, her mind still spinning from the conversation. The Cathal had already found them and now they were running again. She didn't know how much longer she could keep running, but she knew David was right. They had to keep moving, keep fighting. If they didn't, they would lose everything. They reached the back door and David paused, looking over his shoulder to make sure the Cathal weren't right behind them. The door creaked open, revealing a dark alleyway beyond. The tunnel entrance was just ahead. They made their way quickly through the alley, trying to stay as quiet as possible. But every footstep felt like a drumbeat in Lena's ears. Every shadow seemed to hide an enemy. She could feel the Cathal closing in on them, the weight of their presence like a cold hand on her back. When they reached the tunnel, David led her down into the darkness. The underground passage was narrow and damp, the walls covered in grime and dust. But it was safe. For now. We'll need to move fast, David said as he pulled Lena forward. The Cathal are getting smarter. They'll find us eventually. We have to get to the heart of their operation and destroy it. Lena didn't respond. She was too focused on the path ahead, her mind racing with thoughts of the Cathal, the dim, war, and the future. They had no choice now but to fight, to stand up for humanity. The deeper they went into the tunnel, the darker it became. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, but David didn't slow down. They had no time to waste. Every second counted. Lena's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of distant footsteps echoing through the tunnel. David tensed, his hand tightening around hers. The Cathal were getting closer. We're almost there, he said, his voice low and urgent. Just a little further. They reached the end of the tunnel where a small hidden door led to a secret underground base. It was their last hope. David pushed open the door, and the two of them stepped into a dimly lit room. Inside, the room was filled with old equipment, computer screens and maps. But what caught Lena's attention was the large screen on the far wall. It was showing a map of the galaxy, marked with locations of Cathal bases. "This is it," David said, his voice filled with resolve. "We'll use this to find their main base. From there, we can strike." Lena felt a spark of hope. They had a chance. The Cathal wouldn't win, not while she and David were still fighting. The underground room was silent except for the hum of the old computers and the soft breath of Lena and David. The map of the galaxy on the screen flickered faintly, but it was their only lead. Every second counted now. The Cathal were closing in. They had found their hideout, and David knew that time was slipping away faster than he could handle. David stood in front of the screen, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He had been studying the Cathal's map for what felt like hours. He was looking for something, anything that would give them an edge. Lena stood by the door, her eyes scanning the shadows as she tried to keep watch. The Cathal were relentless, and they knew the tunnels better than anyone. David's hand paused, his eyes locking onto a symbol on the screen. It was a location, a marked base deep within the galaxy. It was isolated, far from the reach of Earth's defense systems, and it was where the Cathal had been building their super soldiers. It was their main base. "This is it," David said, his voice tight with resolve. "This is where they're keeping their main force." Lena stepped closer, peering at the app. Her heart raced at the thought of attacking a base like this. It was heavily guarded. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet this was their only chance. She could see the same determination in David's eyes that had always been there. He had never given up on her. And now, he wasn't going to give up on Earth. "We can't let them use us, David," Lena said, her voice steady despite the fear that was creeping in. "We can't let them take over everything. We have to stop them." David nodded, his eyes never leaving the map. "We will, Lena. We have to stop them before they make their move. We have to destroy the base. That's the only way to stop the army they're building." Lena took a deep breath. The plan was risky, but it was their only option. If they didn't act now, the Cathal would continue their work, and it would be too late to stop them. She trusted David with her life, and if that meant putting everything on the line, she would do it. Together, they could make a difference. David turned toward her, his eyes softening for just a moment. "I'll protect you, Lena. No matter what happens, I won't let them take you." Lena gave him a small smile, though her heart was heavy. "I know. I trust you." Without another word, David began gathering the equipment they would need. They had little time to prepare, but David had a plan. He had spent weeks researching the Cathal, studying their technology, their weaknesses. He had been preparing for this moment even before he knew it would come. Now, the time had